I personally differ with him in certain things that he does, the way he does things. I interviewed him in 2008. By then, he was Minister of SPLM, SPLA, and Veteran Affairs. I went to his office in Bilfam, and I found he had books, so many books in his office, and no officers coming to his office. Nobody has, his office is quite isolated because he doesn't have rapport with his subordinates. And he's always into his world, reading books and watching Arsenal playing. He came to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, and I happened to be friends with his deputy. We visited him, and he was telling us the minister is gone away, but he usually goes away for foreign travels without telling his deputy. And when he comes back, he doesn't brief them what he did. He's that kind of person, and he can decide to fly out of Juba to London for Arsenal match without regard to other duties. 2000.
All right, thanks everyone for tuning in. Joining us today is Faris Matthew. He's the Deputy Secretary General for National Salvation Front. We're going to talk about a range of issues that are relevant to South Sudanese. So thank you for joining us today, Faris.
It's my pleasure.
So I want you to begin by telling us about yourself and then about your connection to the National Salvation Front.
How long do you want me to take time to tell you about myself and then the connection? Do we have time?
Just a condensed version.
Okay, I'll try my best. I'm Faris Matthew Richard. I come from Bahr al Ghazal, Wow, from the area of Uyujuku, that is Demzuber, but I call myself son of South Sudan, Southern Sudan by then, as we used to know. We used to say. This is simply because I went to school and I grew up in the three main regions, Wow and Juba. By then, the system was that my father was working with the government, so he would be transferred from Wow to Juba for a couple of years, then transferred again either back to Wow or to Malakal or to Bor or any other town of South Sudan where his service was needed. That's how most of my primary school time in Malakal, we had to learn how to get along with the Shuluk boys and the Nuer boys by speaking their language. It was interesting childhood. Juba as well. So I kind of have schoolmates from the three main regions. Then further education, I was active in the church services and I was part of a theater group. So the bishop in Wow saw in me something to do with the media, and they had to send me to Zambia to study journalism. That was sometimes in the mid-80s. I went to what they call Pan-African Literature College, Pan-African Literature Center for Art and Journalism. That was in Kitwe, Zambia. Then I came and I had to work with the church for some time, fell off with them. I couldn't handle the life of a layman being treated like a religious clergy. So we kind of parted ways. Then I joined the NGO world in Khartoum. By then, South Sudanese were fleeing South Sudan to Khartoum because of the war situation back in the south. That is back in 87, something around that time. I stayed a bit in Khartoum. I got implicated in some SPLA, SPLM activities, and I had to flee Khartoum westward to Chad, Cameroon, where I stayed for about 6 years. I had a kind of different lifetime in Cameroon. I can almost pose like a Cameroonian now. This is because of the time I spent and the life I led there. We're under United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, and I had a job with the Saudi Embassy. I would balance between this and that, and that's how I ended up migrating to Canada. I lived in Windsor, Ontario. Then I moved to Toronto. Then I had to go to school sometimes after going to school in Toronto, to college in Toronto. I had to go to BC to attend Royal Roads University. And then I felt when the CPA came, I felt it was time to go back and pay something to South Sudan. So in 2006, I left Canada for South Sudan. Stayed in the Gulf region for a bit. Then I moved to South Sudan, where I joined the Ministry of Information in WOW. And from there, I was called to Juba. And from Juba, we were chosen as a group of journalists, media practitioners who would be tasked to start up what was called satellite television for South Sudan, South Sudan TV. It's an interesting project that was initially the NSPLM project started by former Minister Samson Kwaje, late Samson Kwaje, peace be upon his soul, and then took it over later after him, Minister Gabriel Changston, a very instrumental politician. I salute him from this platform. We did together a great job by starting South Sudan television on satellite from South Africa, Johannesburg, and later moved to Juba and operated it in Juba right from 2008 till it became later on a corporation which is called now South Sudan Broadcasting Corporation. I parted with South Sudan TV in 2009 due to some complicated issues with the management ministry. Time off, I went to WOW. I was appointed Secretary General for the state government of Western Bahar Ghazal, where I served for about a year or so. Then came back to Juba, joined the ministry. And my coming back to Juba coincided with, it was just after referendum, South Sudan, coincided with the celebration and preparation for celebrations of the independence. Then I was called in to be a member of the media committee under Dr. Riek Machar. He was the head of the chairperson of the high-level committee for the independence celebration. So we did the part of the media in terms of the equipment, in terms of the preparation, the coverage, coordinating media networks to cover the event. And those of you who were in Juba could remember that the whole world came to Juba to see this new baby born South Sudan. And it was one funny story I must tell you here is that if Pagana Mum is hearing or following this episode, let him rest assured that it is not him had disconnected power or the microphone from President al-Bashir when he was about to give his speech. Because this is the saying that is going around the world that, oh, Pagana Mum cut off power. They simply say it in colloquial Arabic, cut off power. Because Riek Machar was, the master of ceremony actually was Abdunagao. Then came Pagan from nowhere, grabbed the mic from him, and he started motivating the crowd by hailing and hallowing SPLM Woye, and then telling the generals who were taking seats to get up and vacate their seats for the guests. Then when the session started, they took it from him back to Abdun, and it came the time when President Bashir was about to give his speech about the independence of South Sudan now. It was then Dr. Riago was asked to introduce President Bashir. And Dr. Riago, when he took the mic, was about to introduce Bashir. Our head, that is the sound system that we had across the road from the podium, overheated because we had connected it right from the night before throughout the day in the heat. And we had about 60 something channels connected to it. So it overheated and it caught fire. The technicians had to unplug them. I remember some Filipino guys we had brought from UAE on along with their equipment. Let me say salute to them for helping us with the celebration of our independence as well. So I thought quickly, and I eyed to the left where our broadcast van of SSTV was stationed, transmitting live. And what I did, I just jumped from the tower because we had built towers, steel towers, in order to put the equipment on top of them. So I just jumped down, came with me one chap, and then we went to the van, the OB van, and I told the guys, give me the sound system, disconnect the transmission and give me the sound system. I'm their former director, so they wouldn't hesitate. One wanted to say, but how come, boss? I just said, give me the sound system. Call the station, tell them to plug or to link with Al Jazeera or any other satellite that is transmitting independently. We have a situation here, and I can't explain now. So they just unplugged quickly, and I got a small piece like this, and I jumped and I climbed the tower, put it. They plugged in. We waved at Riak Machar, and Honorable Riak apologized that there was a technical fault, and as usual, he is so patient, and he introduced President Bashir um, to his independence speech, where he announced that it was Sudan as first country in the world to recognize the independence of South Sudan. I think with this we close the story about Faris Matthew.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I might just go long and long.
Yeah. That's really a good story to tell, and that's a very good summary of yourself and what you've done. So thank you very much. Now I want to transition to your role in the National Salvation Front. So if you can briefly tell us what is your role, and then we'll go into what exactly is National Salvation Front and where did it come from, what is the history of the organization.
My role. Actually, one of the founders of the National Salvation Front. The Salvation Front was founded by a group of officers and politicians led by Lieutenant General Thomas Shirilo Swaka at a time when we realized the SPLM regime had failed the country due to loss of direction. The direction that guides the state towards nation building, forming a state governed by vibrant institutions, equal and equitable rights and duties and opportunities for all without fear of favor. Then we realized this is the situation. We realized that the SPLM was perhaps only good to liberate the land. And we consider, we appreciate, we salute their role in the liberation time from 83 to 2005. But I think it is a moment now that he should leave the nation building and the management of the state and building of the institutions for other people who could do it better. And since nobody listens, so we decided that we have to resist by getting out, advocating for it, and struggling, striving towards these goals. So that's how the National Salvation Front was founded in 6th of March 2017 in Addis Ababa when General Shrilo pronounced it as the new movement in the political arena of South Sudan. It is not by choice that we are a military formation, but it is sometimes the language that certain governments and regimes understand. If you don't have ground pressure, they will not listen to you, coupled with political and diplomatic pressure or a form of resistance. I started with the National Salvation Front as an ambassador for Central and West Africa, as I was telling about the story of how I went to West Africa. So I am kind of quite versed in the affairs of West and Central Africa. I stayed in Central Africa area and I moved to between Chad, Cameroon, Ghana, Togo, Nigeria quite extensively. So for having that know-how and connecting with the right people there, I was appointed ambassador for that region. Then I was tasked to be a deputy chairperson for international relations for the movement, and later on became the chairman of what they call IRC, International Relations Committee. And from that position, I moved to now Deputy Secretary General. This is when we completed having a constitution for the movement and having the structures of the movement in place, where we have a general secretariat is the political wing, where I deputize Secretary General, Madam Alan Masika. We have above that what we call the National Salvation Leadership Council. We have something like a legislative assembly. We call it a National Salvation Council with a speaker and members. We have what we call Federal Civil Authority. It's sort of an executive authority administration with a Commissioner General. I salute him from this platform, Comrade compatriot Ajiba Isaac. So we're kind of a government in full structure. This is to be able to take care of things in the meantime To that, we have a concept and we have a clear plan for federalism as a system of governance in South Sudan. So we have a script, we have a written document about federalism in South Sudan in terms of the political aspect of it, the economical aspect, the social, and also we have a plan for a permanent constitution if when people of South Sudan are ready for.
Okay. So I'll come back to the issue of federalism because this is something people are talking about, whether federalism or confederation or self-determination. But I want to ask something about National Salvation Front. As you know, we have many military and political formations, and oppositions usually say the right thing because they are opposed to the government. So what I want to know is what is different? Why would we think a National Salvation Front is not going to be like SPLM? Because as you said at the beginning, SPLM has achieved something. They were talking about freedom, about liberation, about equality. Look what they've become. So what makes you different?
I will try to tell a story and then let the viewers judge what difference or if we are different at all. Because I cannot claim that we are different until we prove something that we are doing differently. And not necessarily for the sake of being different, but difference for the right purpose. We have had several rounds of talks with the government of Juba. And each time they came to the talks, it was mainly held in Rome, Italy. Each time they came to the talks, they would come empty-handed and they would say, "We don't have anything to present. We came to listen to you. What do you?" The first round of talks, we had what we call declaration of principles. We handed it to them. We told them these are points that we need to agree on if how systemic we can continue with the talks. This is not yet the talks, but the initial stages and the agenda for the talks, starting with the preamble and points to points in terms of sectoral significance. Stuck on this for almost 3 years. Lastly, we only initialed about 8 points out of something like 12 points. The four other points that they did not initial were fundamental issues, things to do with, for instance, we described the conflict in South Sudan as something that surrounds or is around political ethnicity. They differed with us. They said, no, it is only political, the conflict of South Sudan, but it's not ethnical. And it is clear that we have ethnicized the politics of the way we run the state. Nobody can deny that. The other thing is the reference to 1956 as a reference for borders and boundaries of South Sudan. Then the third thing was the issue of reforming the security sector being the military, the organized forces, the security in terms of intelligence. That sector needs to be reformed. And they disagree with us. They said, no, we need to transition it to a professional, more or much of a professional service sector, because we know that this sector is made of some of the SPLA proppers who were fighting during the time of the liberation, and later on, so many militia forces or groups were annexed to the forces. Some were not even officially or formally annexed or integrated to the forces, and it became like Malong has his forces, Kwalmanyang has his forces, Bote Mamur has his forces, and what is his name? This guy who leads Tiger. Anyway, each general has his forces, and they only listen to him. That is not where we take the country with the military formation or a security sector. And the issue of the
So
constitution and a lot of
what is the
yeah, I'm coming to the difference now.
okay?
We are just like so many of the movements outside there in terms of being like-minded, in terms of advocating for what I've just said, constitution, security sector, governance, and so many other issues. Borders, like we have border crisis now with Uganda and Kenya and Sudan and so forth. We can be the same in terms of approach on how we tackle these issues and how we propagate and advocate for them. But how to stand on positions that is For instance, we call ourselves the People's Movement simply because we consider ourselves the vanguard of the people of South Sudan. In terms of what are the aspirations of the people of South Sudan? People of South Sudan believed in peace, stability, a nation that is based on institutions and rule of law that governs with constitution that is people or grassroots based, things like that. Now, let me give you an example of the 2018 peace talks or the RRCs. We all converged in Khartoum, all the oppositions. By then, we were in an alliance called SOA, South Sudan Opposition Alliance. That included.
I wanted to I want to ask something before you. I want to ask something before you go to that.
Go ahead.
I want to know the difference between, yeah, I want to know the difference between what you proposed as the reforms for the SPLA and what they proposed. Like, what was the difference between the two proposals in terms of making the SPLA a professional army?
What they propose is they believe the sector should be as it is in terms of the manpower, in terms of the units, in terms of the system that runs it. Maybe it just should be upgraded to a level where they believe they call it professional service sector now. But for us, we believe that a lot of the manpower that constitute the security sector need to be retired. And those who were born in 2005 by now should be something like 20 years old. These are folks who are born during peacetime with better orientation. They are not traumatized like those of us who would say, Shala Buk the Talga. There is that has a different doctrine in terms of military doctrine. But the doctrine of the SPLA time, it was Inshallah Buk the Talga. Even if it's your father, you shoot him. That is not the kind of orientation we want to see given to the forces. Now, coming to the formation of the forces, how do you define the number or determine the number of forces that you need in terms of military, in terms of security, organized forces, police, what, so forth? It is it has a technical way of assessing the threat and the fears and the assets and the institutions that you have. That determines the number of army you need to build. Suppose we say we need 200,000 soldiers, then we go proportionately. Let's say we say Jonglei state is the highest in population. We give a proportion of that population to the number of the army that we need. For instance, if we say bring 1,000 from Western Baragazal, Jonglei would be like 1,700 or 1,500. And we bring all these people, train them professionally, graduate them, and then deploy them in South Sudan. And the deployment should be someone from Equatoria will be serving in Upper Nile, the Upper Nile guy will be serving in Western Equatoria, and things like that. There is no sort of regional favoritism in terms of deploying the forces, and a lot of other things in terms of their orientation, their training. We have to be careful about what weapons also we import, because we have been lately accused of importing weapons that are banned internationally, chemical weapons, and you have seen what was bombed. Our folks in Nasser were bombed with. These are banned sort of ammunition, and we are in a time when South Sudan is sanctioned by an armed embargo. How were they able to get hold of these? It is also another thing. Now I hear the United Nations is sort of going after them with possibly forming a committee of investigation inquiry about what happened in South Sudan. Now, how different we are from other movements or other parties. As I was giving the example of the RRCs in 2018, we all converged, we all convened in Sudan. We even took part as NAS in the initial stages of the agreement, formulating it. We had our touches on the security. Now we realize at a certain stage that this agreement was a sellout, and it's not going to serve the people of South Sudan. It is not basically addressing the root causes of the conflict. And we opted out. And as I was saying, that we were part of an alliance called SAWA. There was a National Salvation Front in that alliance. There was the party of Emmanuel Ajawin, NDM, SSA, UF of Paul Malong, Real SPLM. No, Real SPLM was not part of it. And the party of Gabriel Changsong, the branch of NDM for Dr. Lama Col, that party led by Bakasoro, SSNMC, and Josephine Lagu, and Hussein Abdul Baghi, and who else? That group, they opted to go to Juba. We were all coming from one alliance. We were like-minded. We speak the same lingua in terms of projecting the suffering of South Sudanese and what we're standing by them for. But they responded to the call of going to Juba. They said they would go and struggle from within. What we understand is they were being attracted by the positions in terms of the power sharing plan that was part of the agreement. And this is only what is being implemented. The segment that talks about appointing ministers and vice presidents and so forth. And you can see even how they clashed about the distribution of posts. Sawa was given one post of vice president, and they could not agree among themselves. Lam wanted it, Changson wanted it, Bakasoro wanted it, Hussein Abdul Baghi, and finally, what they did is they said, "Let us go to Kir." They went to Salva and told him that, Mr. President, we have not come to a consensus about the candidate for vice president for South. We are giving it up to you to choose one among us to lead. Salva chose Hussein Abdul Baghi, and they became vice president. So you see, this is where the
So a
difference
couple of
comes.
things
Yes, go ahead.
So a couple of things I want to ask. One is how you are trying to deal with the issue of ethnicity, because you said earlier that our politics has been ethnicized. So that's one element. So I want to know how NAS is trying to stay away from that. The other thing is when you formed SAR before the parties you mentioned went back to Juba, what was your plan? A non-violent, or was it a military solution to the problem in South Sudan before the parties went back with the agreement?
First, we had what is called SSNDA, South Sudan National Democratic uh, uh, Alliance. Then we came to SAWA, and SAWA we found ourselves in a situation where we need to bring the opposition together. Unity of the opposition, we felt that would be forced to reckon with in terms of facing Juba. And we had even talked to the IO. I remember Deputy Chairman of the IO, late Udwar, had agreed and gave confirmation to us in Addis Ababa that IO is part of SOA. Then the next day, when we talked to Dr. Riak, and by then Dr. Riak was in confinement in South Africa, we had worked so hard that we even boycotted some of the sittings of the talks, saying that if Dr. Riak is not released, we would not continue with the negotiations until he got released. And when he was told, he said either the IO becomes the only chair of SOA or they are not joining SOA. And they ended up not joining because we had set it up in terms of rotational leadership, that every 6 months, one party takes over the leadership of SOA. But they didn't want it that way. They said they are a big opposition. You can see now that this answers your question of how different we are from others. And also deciding to go to Juba for the sake of becoming vice president and becoming minister of this and that it also sets us different. In so many round of talks, we would be approached and be promised positions. If you come to Juba, you will be like this. So Cirillo, you will be a vice president and we'll give you several ministerial posts for your folks. And we stood our ground and we went and created something new called SOMA. It was through a Hague declaration. We did it in the Hague, Netherlands, South Sudan Opposition Movement Alliance, and that was formed by 6 parties: South Sudan, South Salvation, South National Salvation, and Real SPLM of Pagana Movement. And there was what else? Another party. I don't remember the acronym. So we started well. Now strategically being called by others, holdout group or non-signatories to the agreement. they kind of have names calling us around. And we've been having a shaky relationship among ourselves. At one point, those of Paul Malong and Paganamum opted out of the wagon simply because we had put up a charter that we need as members to sign that charter. And one thing that is not being liked by Malong in that charter is the issue of federalism. And I know you have questions about that you will ask later. He does not approve of federalism as system of governance for South Sudan. He didn't want to sign the charter. And we said his membership would be frozen if he doesn't sign the charter. And Pagana Mum sided with him, so they became two of them on the side. But when things became really, what should I say? It became to a situation where they felt that Juba was coming seriously now to Rome and wants us back to Juba. By all means, they came back and we were all together called non-signatories. And we surprised Juba because Juba felt they had a side talk with them in Naivasha, Kenya, and they went and initial signed the GOP, that is the Declaration of Principles that they had only initialed. So now this second round, when they were coming to Rome, Juba thought that they were coming to a situation where they will have the opposition broken up into two. So they will be negotiating with this group and negotiating with that group, and it will be easier. Now they divided us. But they came and found us one. And they wanted to go back to that. But we said, no, in politics, we change the rules of the games when we like. And that's how we merged again as Soma. Until now coming the initiative of what is called Tumaini by the president, by Salva, asking Dr. Ruto to mediate. And now we also differed again. They felt they would join the Tumaini in Kenya. We refused to go to Kenya. We said we are not going to Kenya. One, Tumaini is of no clear agenda. Second, Kenya is not a peaceful ground, a secure ground for us to not be free to talk our mind. And thirdly, Tumaini is an engine to revive the RRCs, to find better ways of implementing the RRCs. And we differed. They went to Kenya, and we told the Kenyans that we want pre-negotiations sort of consultation in Rome before we go anywhere. And the Kenyans flew to them, and they explained to us it is to find way how to operationalize RRC. We said we are not signatories of RRC, so it does not concern us.
So the question I want to emphasize is the issue of ethnicity. So how is NAS staying away from that? Because there has been accusation of NAS targeting other ethnic groups. So how are you staying away, and how do you respond to those accusations? So how are you staying away from the issue of ethnicity as a practical solution you are undertaking now?
We preach to disciples everywhere in South Sudan. We have forces in Upper Nile, we have forces in Equatoria, and we have forces in Bahr al-Ghazal. I myself, I come from Bahr al-Ghazal, and several others. If you wish to go across the board in the movement, you will see a contrast of people from Yen Matthew being the commander in Upper Nile, and Okelo Gilo being the representative and vice chairperson of the international relations in Addis Ababa. I'm Deputy Secretary General. You got General Faiz Ismail from Bahr Ghazal as Deputy Chairman of the movement. You get General Camilo Otore from Eastern Equatoria. He's the head, the General Chief of Staff, and you get Isaac Ajiba. He's the head of the executive branch of the government of National Salvation Front. Rasho John, IGP of NAS, is a Murle, and these are the few that I can mention here. But we've got several, and the way we have set up our policies is that it is non-tribal, non-religious, non-sectarian. And that's why we insist on this federalism as a system of governance, because it also helps to accommodate the diversity of South Sudan in terms of different cultural groups and ethnic sections of the society. You've got 64 different nations in South
Okay.
Sudan. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So you've answered that because usually sometimes politicians say things, but they don't actually implement what they say within their own formation. So that is really helpful in terms of the ethnic composition of NAS. Now I want to ask something that many people usually say: if there are atrocities or there are people being attacked in the streets, people just simply say it's NAS. How do you respond to that?
We first ask for evidence, material evidence. When we say NAS, you should have either leftover of NAS uniform, bullets, ammunition, or you've captured something, or the aftermath of the incident you came uncovered and there is material evidence. Operations that we are engaged in or we become part of, we usually issue a release claiming responsibility for such operations. We are engaged in what we call IHL, international humanitarian law, sort of training with NGOs, international NGOs that kind of sort of partner with us in terms of giving orientation to our forces in the first place and the political cadres in the second place. So we are kind of aware about issues of LGBT, issues of sexual harassment, issues of any sort of violations that are considered war crimes or crimes against humanity. So we kind of stay away from that. You can see some of these oppositions, they have been sanctioned. Like Paul Malone is under sanction now. For him to take part in any international travel where he needs to be a part of a talk, he has to get the lift of his ban from the UN. And equally, some members of the government also, they are kind of banned from international travel because of the atrocities that have been leveled against them. But we're trying to, as much as we can, to stay away from this. Some forces are not really organized forces, but sort of hit and run gangs sometimes operate along the roads, the highways. And when they hit and run, they will immediately say, simply because we overrun most of the areas in Equatoria, so it is easily leveled against us that we are the ones who have committed this. And sometimes you will see that they will come back and say, oh, it's the government, we found uniform and we got some eyewitnesses who were victims in the incident. They said these people were dressed like this and they were speaking like that, and in what language. So you can easily tell.
Okay. Okay. Now I want to ask about the question of leadership. There was a division within NAS. There were people accusing your chairman of dictatorial tendencies as reflecting NAS as a one-man show. This is something we've seen in South Sudan. So why was the case and what was really happening? And you can connect that with leadership in South Sudan because if it is happening in organizations like NAS that many people see as alternatives, then it may make some people concerned if we're going back the same way of SPLA, SPLM, and then President Kiir. So what was happening with those people complaining about the chairman?
People complaining because some folks sit in America or they sit in Canada or Europe, somewhere in Australia, and they expect a guerrilla movement or a resistance movement to be managed like an NGO or a company that has a board of directors and rights of voting and this and that. We are not handing out flowers, roses, and candies for birthday. We're in a serious business of war here. I'm not trying to say, yes, we are dictatorial, but this, this can tell you the limits to which we extend our legs and arms in terms of democracy. I've talked about the structures that we have managed to build. So we have a government that operates in our liberated areas. We have an assembly that legislate laws and rules and acts for the movement and for the areas where the operations that we are leading in some areas. That is the extent of the democracy that differs us even from other parties. The SPLM did not have a parliament. We have a parliament in absentia, in exile. We have other structures, executive, and we have a legal judiciary that is also separated. Yes, it is appointed. That is the difference. It becomes sort of manipulated to some extent. But this is the nature of the business we are in.
So I want now to transition to we've touched on this, and I want to connect this with the issue of federalism and confederation. This is the issue of ethnic relations. So there are many people in Upper Nile, Greater Upper Nile, and Bahr Ghazal who are opposed to federalism. I don't know why. Is it because of the revision in the 1980s? Are they afraid of things like Kokora or what? Because there's always that opposition. Now, is it because of ethnic relations and people are saying the call for federalism is a guise for anti-Jiang sentiment? Is that the case? And if not the case, is it because federalism itself, they see it as not any solution to anything?
We have been together at it since 1947. Our forefathers demanded federalism as the, the most suitable system to govern in terms of fulfilling our urge for autonomy. Now, only now, in 2005, we part ways and we say, and it becomes all of a sudden and wanted something. It is basically the fear from losing control and losing monopoly over power. That is basically what it is. And then they will go and link it to some Kokoro sentiments that it is what happened in 83 or 82. Now it's going to happen again. They are calling for federalism. Federalism is not Kokoro. Kokoro is not federalism. In the actual fact, federalism is something that is a concept. It is a system that is tried out there. You have seen it in Ethiopia. You've seen it in Nigeria. We have seen it in the U.S. We have seen it in India. We have seen it in different countries around the world, whether it is African or Asian or European. And then you can tell for yourself in Switzerland. You can tell for yourself if it is something that is worth trying or not. And kind of similarities that we have with some of these nations that have tested federalism, and it worked for them in terms of solving the diversity that they have. The issue of manipulation of power, resources, and other opportunities, you can solve it and resolve it through federalism. So it is not anything.
Here's a
Yes, it is. You wanted to say something.
So here's the thing some people are saying that the issue is not what you call it. The issue is sharing of power between the central government and the periphery. So that's the issue. So what if the existing system in South Sudan was to sort of decentralize power so that the central government doesn't have all the power, so divided? Would we still talk about federalism, or is it that decentralization that we call federalism? So what is exactly is the difference between just decentralizing power and federalism?
What we have now is some sort of federalism, and this is Islamic federalism that we have inherited from Sudan by simply decentralizing power to some extent, but in the actual sense, you have not released power to them, actual power for monetary power, that in terms of control over resources, and dynamic power, and other powers, you have not released that. So basically, what it is that they have sort of a decentralized system that is still controlled. And even within that system, in the center, you will see a control where there is no, for instance, in the executive, you don't have a prime minister that functions as head of an executive. And then you have a sort of a separation between the sovereign power and the executive power. You don't have that. Can you imagine now Juba has not had any Council of Ministers sitting since March or since February? Since February, the Council of Ministers did not say how the government is functioning. We don't know. This is where we call one-man show. And now the president, who is the head of the Council of Ministers, is not in. First vice president is suspended, and we have a vice president who is taking over the country together. But Kiir is so smart. When Bolmel is left to act, he's done it together with the security apparatus. He's there being watched by head of intelligence, head of defense, head of interior, and so forth. So we having a joke here. So in federalism, you take care of your own resources in terms of
Yep.
exploring the resources, utilizing them, taking care of your own salaries, building of and development of infrastructure. Your taxes are within, but there is a ratio for the central government or the federal government. It's only that the federal federal entity is considered to be minuscule. So they end up with something like 20% and another 20% being a reserve. The 60% goes to the state. And now the 60% that goes to the state, 40% goes to the peripheries, to the Payams and the Boomers, and 20% remain in the head of the center of the headquarters of the state. The same way they treat the federal headquarters, because mainly where do we have the bulk of our population? The majority of our populations are in the rural areas. In towns, we have only a few hundred thousands here and there, but millions of people are there rearing their cattle and taking care of their agriculture. So this is where we have to build infrastructure, where we have to improve human, human resource and so forth.
Okay. So one last question about federalism, and then we'll go to quickly because we are already at 1 hour mark. So I personally like federalism as long as it is a practical federalism where the people are given the power, not just what is happening now in South Sudan. One of the things I fear is ethnic federalism. So you've seen this in Nigeria, you've seen this in Ethiopia, and it is not promising. So how can we ensure that if we institute federalism in South Sudan, it doesn't morph into ethnic federalism?
The way South Sudan is segmented or the sections are divided, it is already taken care of about that. You will not, the only exception is, for instance, if you go to Bahr Ghazal. You go to Bahr Ghazal, an area like Warab or Lakes, even though there are other minorities that exist there, but the whole area is overrun by Jing. For instance, we went to Warab, the Council of Ministers is done in Jing language. I'm not saying I'm against that, but it is not the national language. It's not the official language of business in South Sudan. And you have the Bongo who are there, and actually the Secretary General of State of Warab at that time was a Bongo fellow. So the guy was forced to speak Jing and to do the minutes of the Council of Ministers in Jing. So this is where the areas we have trouble. But you will always have problems when you are implementing a new system. But in general, you get most parts of other states have different tribes and different ethnic groups. And when power comes, it is easily divided among people in equal and equitable manners. For instance, in Western Bahr Ghazal alone, you have 27 different ethnic groups. They are small groups, but they are different in terms of their cultural orientation, their what not. And if you go to Upper Nile, you get an issue with the Nuer being all over the place. And that brings maybe later a question about succession. There are calls now you hear in Sudan, in South Sudan. In Upper Nile, the North nation calling for separation of North Kingdom or North Republic that brings together the North in part of Upper Nile and Gambela. Something that is I think, out of the imagination. How can you fight two wars in two different countries? A country with a military might like Ethiopia, you're going to fight them and secede Gambela or separate Gambela from Ethiopia and annex it to South Sudan. It is.
I think one of the things they
Go ahead.
yeah. So one of the things they want to do, it's what the German people want to do in Western Europe, and what Russian-speaking populations want to do in Eastern Europe,
Ukraine.
where they want to form their own country, because there are people who speak Russian, for example, in Ukraine. Yeah, so that's what some Nuer people want to do. They want to form a Nuer nation, and the Nuer in Ethiopia and the Nuer in South Sudan would become part of a Nuer nation. So this is something that, and that's what I fear, because these groups are internally diverse. Jiang is internally diverse. Even if we have a Jiang nation, would still have internal problems. So that's what I fear. So, but thank you if you've really addressed it properly. So what I want to ask.
How does that work when you have Gambela here and you have Bibor and you have the rest of the Upper Nile, you have Nasser area, and then you have Nuer in unity somewhere across the other side. And in the middle here, you have Apadang, Jing, and Cholo on the western bank. we just have to agree to accept and agree that God created us, all of us, the 64 in this part, and we need to integrate and do things right.
So you're against the call, you're against the call for self-determination in the Equatoria and also in Upper Nile, because Dr. Dingabol has been calling for the secession or self-determination or confederation, because confederation gives autonomous regions more power than federalism. So are you against these calls for self-determination or secession in Equatoria and Upper Nile?
As a Faris, yes, I'm against that. Sorry, as a NAS, as a member of NAS, and speaking on behalf of NAS, I'm against the subsuccession or the separation of Equatoria as a region, Upper Nile as a region. Even in Bahr Ghazal, it started coming up. Recently, there is a member of parliament in Lake State, from Lake State, also came up with the call that they want the area of lakes to be separated from South Sudan, citing several reasons that the liberation war, they have not been compensated, and they are only called to fight on behalf of Bahr Ghazal, but when the goodies come, Bahr Ghazal, some other people enjoy it, but the lake people don't get anything. All these other blame. So, but as personally, I divided. One part of me feels that it is their right to opt for independence. But the other part of me feels that we become weaker. Even the issue of confederalism, it gives yes more power to autonomy, but it would rather become an independent state for some time, and it builds itself and it becomes strong enough to be a confederal unit in a unitary confederalism or confederation, rather than right from scratch you jump into confederation when you have not even managed the state at that level of not even becoming a region. So it is confusing. That's why we are advocating federalism. We think that is within the same parameters of these states, the 10 states and the two administrative areas. They should be upgraded actually to states, and we just do try federal system in terms of decentralizing power, decentralizing control over resources, and see how it works. And that way, you will not grab my opportunities. We will share this national cake, that is for sure. And whatever I have locally, it is my right. If you visit me, then you will share it with me. Otherwise, it is for the good of the people who are here. And that way, then when we build stronger entities in terms of federal states, then they can opt for confederalism.
Okay. So we are towards the end. I don't want to let this go without us talking, because we've talked a lot about very important issues that I wanted to cover. So we've already covered them. But I want your opinion on the recent departure of Nial Deng Nial from SPLM. Do you think it means nothing, or do you think it shows more disintegration within the SPLM?
First of all, let me welcome Nial Deng Nial on behalf of my organization and on behalf of our alliance, SOMA, to the world of the opposition. At least he came to his senses at last, or maybe he had been sensing this, and the decision was not easy to take, but finally he took the decision. It is a bold decision, actually. So it means a lot. It means a lot for the SPLM, SPLA, because he's a general as well, and it means a lot for us in the opposition. It looks like it is a pre-planned thing, because he came, he declared his party, SSSM, and then immediately he joined UPA. And this brings us to your question about us and why not joining UPA. As I mentioned earlier, some members of the UPA were members of an alliance that is SOMA with us, and then they went to Nairobi for Tumaini. And when they found themselves, they had to be a stronger bloc talking one language against the government, then they would not have won enough concessions in terms of talking with the government for an agreement. Nial is is contradicting himself. He came out and he's talking about reforms within the SPLM. And he formed something called SSM. Now you quit and you still talk about reform there. And you form something different here. It doesn't work. You should have done like Pagan, coming out with your with your SPLM briefcase that holds the same manifesto, the same everything, and you call it Nial branch or Nial wing or anything else you call it, maybe SPLM proper, because the Pagan named his real SPLM. And now you try to enact or institute those reforms and changes that you suggest should happen in the SPLM within this movement that you've carried with you and attract people in those of Paul Manyang, those of Majaga God, those of Rebecca Nyandeng, Vote Mamur, Waniga. You attract them, you make them come to you because you are speaking the real SPLM or the SPLM proper. That is where I feel that he has not really done right. And he was telling that he was not supposed to. I don't like people who happen to be part of a movement, and when they part ways, they expose the movement. There are things that are very sensitive, like saying that 2013 could have been avoided, but had it not been of this and that. This is like causing and instigating sort of another controversial situation. You were part of that regime, and you did not speak up about how it could be inevitable. But now, because you're differing with it, now you're trying to expose the regime. You just come, talk about the reforms, say what is supposed to be right to be said, and now we don't know whether he's going to be leading political resistance or it is both political and military. And where is he going to fight? I personally uh, differ with him in certain things that he does, the way he does things. I interviewed him in 2008. By then, he was Minister of SPLM, SPLA, and Veteran Affairs. I went to his office in Bilfam, and I found he had books, so many books in his office, and no officers coming to his office. Nobody has, his office is quite isolated because he doesn't have rapport with his subordinates, and he's always into his world, reading books and watching Arsenal playing. He came to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, and I happened to be friends with his deputy. We visited him, and he was telling us the minister is gone away, but he usually goes away in for foreign travels without telling his deputy. And when he comes back, he doesn't brief them what he did. He's that kind of person. And he can decide to fly out of Juba to London for Arsenal match without regard to other duties. 2005, when he was appointed Minister of Regional Cooperation, he didn't like the ministry. And he went away, he went and stayed in London till 2008, then he came back to Juba. So he's that kind of spoiled guy that is the son of William Deng. This level of, in terms of credentials, and he's a lawyer by profession. He's a top military officer. He's in hierarchy, might be the one to replace Salva Kiir Mayardit. So he's growing with all these elements in him, making him a little bit not looking beyond his nose.
Entitlement.
Yes, but that's not how things work in many cases. This is not an attack to his personality, but it's an analysis of his psychology. But I salute him for other things. Yeah, but I salute him for other things that he did well. He had been a bright chief negotiator. In one of the rounds in Rome, he was the head of the government delegation. Sometimes he would come, and other times Benjamin Marial would be the one. They both did great jobs for the government. So I think they deserve to be saluted.
This is something people need to hear, because when someone comes out and giving the people an impression that they are a national, some sort of a national leader or a potential president, then I think critique of how they govern or how they lead ministries or institutions is really good to hear from insiders like you. So thank you for sharing. And I want to ask you about uh, your final word to South Sudanese. But before I do that, I wanted to make a comment about what Nial. Reforms can happen when he was part of the SPLM. So he can talk of reforms because he is part of that movement to make it a better movement. But when he leaves, I'm not sure why he's talking about reforms. He should talk about maybe overhauling the whole system in South Sudan through that movement. but it's like he's just on the fence, saying that he's freezing his membership. It's like there is a potential for them to take him back. But I think reforms for now, I think it's wrong headed. He should focus on that movement, as you explained, to attract members. What if people join his movement because they want to change things? And the SPLM members still say, oh, we want you back. What is he going to do? Is he going to leave these people with that movement and then goes back to the SPLM? Or what is he going to say? Let us all go back to the SPLM. It's a lot of problems. So thank you for explaining that. I want to ask you, what is your final word as a person, as Faris Matthew Richard, and what is NAS telling the people of South Sudan?
NAS is telling the people of South Sudan to continue being resilient and to be part of the revolution and the struggle that is going on. We know that our people are struggling in different ways and different means. Every day in South Sudan is a struggle. When you wake up and you get no breakfast for either yourself or your kids, no school for your kids, no hospital to treat your sick. The roads are the kind of roads that I've seen the other day that land cruisers could not cross in Upper Nile. And if we had only between 2011 and now, which is 11 years or 14 years, we had about 25 billion US dollars in revenues from one source, which is oil, leave alone the non-oil sectors and other exports or revenue sources of for South Sudan. 25 billion US dollars in 14 years. This could have built a ring road between linking Malakal with Juba, Juba with Wau, and Wau with Malakal. Highways, and even with the possibility of building a railways, also a ring one, and at least do one big hospital and one big farm that is sort of a government project, and one else something like an industrial sort of a factory. Most of our population are cattle headers. I've not seen a cheese factory around Warap or around lakes or Tunja or Kodok. I've not seen yogurt being manufactured in Juba. And with all the cattle we have like 15 million heads of cattle, more than the people of South Sudan itself. But yet we import milk from Uganda to Juba. We drink milk from Ugandan cows. This is the kind of mismanagement that is happening. Where did the $25 billion go? We could have used that, as I said, to build 10 hospitals in the 10 states, 10 big farms as government farms to serve like a role model for projects to be copied by the population and to be source of jobs as well, and do some sort of factories, mini factories here and there, using the most popular products that is produced in the areas. If it is a cattle growing area, then you should have something like cheese factories, milk factories, skin factories, and meat processing factories and stuff like that. With that money, that money alone could do that kind of thing. So I'm saying we have to take these guys to task. This is not something we will not do like Salva Kiir when he says they only got people who know how to eat, but they don't know how to work. And he hires and fires them like no tomorrow. He doesn't take them to task. But the day will come, we'll take them to task. You know what happened in 2010? I was watching Hard Talk on BBC, and that was a live broadcast from Juba. Zainab Badawi came from London, flown straight to Juba, to the State House, and from Salva's office. No consultancy, no consultation in terms of people who know how to handle media things, to prepare His Excellency and even to record that interview instead of airing it live. He was in his usual dark suit and with cowboy hat, and he was sitting there sweating. He would be asked a question, and then the BBC cameraman would be like zooming on his face, and you will see his sweats, and he will be wiping it with a handkerchief before he would answer a question. Zainab asked him, Mr. President, from 2005 to 2010, 5 years, you have earned $5 billion US dollars in oil revenues, and 70% of these 5 billions come from oil. 30% are international aids, grants and aids. What have you done with the money? There is no infrastructure development. There is no schools, no hospitals, no food security for your people. And there are floods all over the country. As I said, he wiped his face and he said, where did you get this information from? That's the journalist. Zainab said, Mr. President, it is from the UN, the World Bank report. Your Minister of Finance is aware of that. You have earned $5 million. This is just a lump sum. 70% of it is in oil revenues and 30% uh, other grants and aids. What have you done with the money? He paused and then he said, go and ask the Minister of Finance. So you see that kind of thing. And I was there managing the TV, seeking those of Luka Byung. By then he was the Minister of Presidential Affairs, begging him that we need an one-on-one with the president. We need to project him as a statesman. We need to plan an interview that gets done in episodes, but we would coach him how to handle questions and how to appear. We will even use makeup and prepare him very well for this kind of thing. They asked us to bring scripts. We filed the scripts to the presidency. Till then, nobody. But they believed in BBC. Now they came and embarrassed him the way it happened. So basically, as National Salvation Front, we're telling the people to be resilient, to continue struggling the way they are struggling. We are trying our best. We don't promise wonders, but we work within our abilities. And we hope together with the other members of the opposition movements and the regional and international community, we'll be able to bring the regime of Juba to their knees and to listen to the senses of what is supposed to be done for South Sudan, which they deserve. They deserve a better life than what they are in at the moment. As far as I would advise my fellow compatriots in the SPLM, SPLA, that enough is enough, and it is not bad or it is not wrong to admit mistakes. They should come out next coming event or occasion that is public occasion. They come out to the people of South Sudan, or they don't need even an occasion. Salva can grab the mic and the cameras of SSBC and tell the people of South Sudan, enough is enough. I've done my part. 17 years with the Anyanya, 21 years with the SPLM, SPLA, and now we have got a country for you. We have failed to build institutions. We have failed to put the country, the nation together. And we want to leave the legacy of the liberation life. We hand it over to you. Try with this emerging new generation. Maybe they can do better than what we are trying to do. We are good at liberating the country and we have done it. And that would be best way forward for South Sudan. In my view, I could be wrong, but I wait for another version of your show when some other guest will come and prove me wrong, and I will learn from that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This has been really very helpful. You've talked about things that other people do not know, and I'm very sure we'll talk again because you're not only someone who is with NAS, you're also someone who worked in the government of South Sudan, and you have insider information that many people do not know. And also, when people tell stories, people narrativized these issues in the way that align with your views. Objectivity is lost in the process. So that's why it's a good idea, for example, talking to you about what you've done with SSPS. And I talked to Hakim Dario, and I'm going to talk to other people because it gives us a bigger picture. So I want to thank you for your time.